Shalom from Karen Biavna. There's a game we sometimes play with young children to help them develop their thinking skills called the opposites. We'll ask them, what is the opposite of night? Day. What is the opposite of tall? Short. Along those lines, let's ask, what is the opposite of a mitzorah? And the answer is a kohen. Rabbi Yitzchak Twersky in his Sefer Amitah Shel Torah points out that a number of ways a kohen and mitzorah are opposites. I'd like to explain in what sense that's so, and focus for a bit on the significance of that contrast. First, let's focus on the fact that a mitzorah is meant to dwell michutz la-machana, outside Machana Yisrael. On the other hand, the Kohen, his main function is in the middle, in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Mishkan. Also in terms of the clothing. A mitzorah's clothing is meant to be torn, begadav yufrumim. On the other hand, the Kohen wears special clothing, the chavod u'litefaret. With respect to the physical grooming of the individual, a mitzorah is not meant to cut his hair, it's meant to grow his hair wild. On the other hand, a Kohen, particularly Kohen Gadol, is meant to get a haircut on a regular basis. And most significantly, a Kohen is associated with Tahara and a Mitzorah with Tum'ah. In fact, Chazal tell us that Mitzorah Choshev Kemet, the Tum'ah of Mitzorah, in some ways parallels Tum'at Met. It's interesting that we find that when Melech Aram sends to Melech Yisrael that he's interested in Melech Yisrael curing Naaman of his tzarat, then the reaction of Melech Yisrael is Elokimani lahamit ulachayot. The implication is that a mitzorah is like a met, and one that cures a mitzorah is Mechaye Meitim. And who in fact is it that it's mitaher a mitzorah? A kohen. A kohen that's the source of life is Mechaye Meitim, in a sense, when he's mitaher the mitzorah. The lesson that perhaps we're meant to learn from here is that the very fact that one's heart is beating and his lungs are breathing does not necessarily mean that he's alive. Ele mitzvot asher yaseh otam ha'adam v'chai bahem. True life is associated with a person's being involved in spiritual pursuits. The extent to which a person follows the path of the mitzorah, as involved in lashon hara, as involved in ga'ava, those things which bring about tzarat, then in a certain sense, he's in a vegetative state. But to the extent to which a person follows the path of the Kohen, as involved in Avodat Hashem, in spiritual pursuits, at those times a person is truly alive. Rav Biederman relates the following Ma'aseh Shelo Haya. He relates there was once a fellow that had difficulty finding a shidduch. Despite the fact that the fellow had all sorts of wonderful qualities, nevertheless, there was one thing that was holding him back. His father was a very coarse individual, a great glutton. And when people would hear about his father, the fellow's father, they would say no to the shidduch. There was some wise shadchan that comes along and said, I have a solution. Okay, the bachur was happy to hear. And then he suggested to some fellow that had a daughter with wonderful qualities, maybe you want to think of dating this fellow. When the father of the girl asked, but what's the father of the bachur like? The response to the shadchan was, the fellow's father is not amongst the living. Okay, so the girl's father figures, if the guy's father is not amongst the living, I don't really care about what the fellow's father is like. Okay, they meet, and lo and behold, they find favor in each other's eyes, and they get engaged. The problem started, though, when at the Msibat Erusin, at the engagement party, there's this fellow sitting right next to the Chassan that's eating anything within arm's reach, eating, drinking like a glutton. The father of the girl asks, "Who is this fellow?" And of course he's told, well, that's the father of the Chatan. Right away, the father of the girl turns to the Shadchan and says, "Hey, Lama Ribisani, what's going on over here? Why'd you fool me? I thought you said that the father is not amongst the living." So Shadchan takes him by the arm. The Shadchan turns to the father of the Kala and says, "Tell me, look at that fellow. Is that called living? Vatem hadveikim b'Hashem Elokechem chayim kolchem hayom." True living is dveikim b'Hashem Elokechem. Mi'ish hachafetz chayim ohev yamim l'ros tov nitzor l'shon chameira sur meira v'asei tov. Shabbat shalom.